Well, good evening and welcome to the Kansas City Public Library and the first plenary session of the Stay at Home Club. Well, I'm Henry Fortunato, the Director of Public Affairs, and tonight it is a particular pleasure to have you here because tonight, as I think some of you know, we mark the return of Rudy Maxa to the Kansas City Public Library. It's been good. Well, there'll be more of that. For those of you who are keeping count, it's been 6 years since Rudy's last visit. So quickly, a show of hands, how many of you attended the talks that Rudy did back in early 2007? That's not bad. That's good. Actually, that's a great demonstration of what I'm about to tell you. 2007 feels like a long time ago. And in library years, which are beginning to seem a lot like dog years, it's almost ancient history. I was still pretty new in my job here in 2007, still trying to figure out how I was going to fulfill the mandate of the library's Board of Trustees. Their mandate was, well, they put it bureaucratically, but the essence of it was get bodies in the door and fannies in the seats. And for those of you sitting on the hard seats in the back, you have my gratitude and my sympathy. So, what do you do when you have a tough assignment? My default is to call on my friends. I've known Rudy Maxa for more than 30 years, stretching back to when we both lived in Washington, D.C. Rudy agreed to do something that we haven't done before or since. 3 talks on 3 consecutive months. It was a bit of a gamble, but that's what you do sometimes. As it turned out, that first series was a resounding success. Indeed, whether you realize it or not, those of you who are with us for Rudy's talk 6 years ago were part of a major moment in library history. What those of us who put on these events every week think of as the beginning of the library's embrace of extensive public programming. Rudy, and those of you who were there then, were present at the creation. And so tonight, I think it's fitting that Rudy and the rest of you are here with us again as we launch another new initiative, a major drive to grow the membership of our oldest volunteer support group, the Friends of the Kansas City Public Library. My dear friend and esteemed colleague, Chepto Kazutan Buckner, the library's deputy director, she's there waving in the background, the most important Kenyan American we know, Chepto has taken on the Friends as one of her priority projects for 2013. She's working with Tom Platt and the Friends board, and we are in the process of re-engineering this organization to make it a truly vital partner in the library's ongoing success. For those of you who want to be a part of it, for those of you who want to demonstrate your support for, quite frankly, one of the most dynamic public libraries in the nation, this is the way to do it. I should say that the Friends are not asking for much. An individual membership is only $25 for couples, which is to say 2 individuals living at the same address. We'll leave it at that. It's just $40. Of course, if you wish to contribute more, that's okay too. Precisely. I myself am a $100 a year member. These funds are only used for support of library services and programs, and more important than the actual dollar amount is what your aggregate moral support says to our major foundation and corporate donors. It says, you like what we're doing, and you want us to continue doing it, and that means a lot. Rudy's visit tonight is made possible in part by the support of the Friends. Rudy told me that going forward, he'll be happy to make these talks an annual event. For those of you who are members of the Friends of the Library, there was a special wine and seriously heavy hors d'oeuvres reception following the question and answer session upstairs in the northwest corner. And for those of you who are not members, well, join us tonight, and you can join us tonight. I'll be back at the end of the program to explain how tonight's reception is going to work. As usual, it's a little complicated, but I know you can figure it out. But now it's time for the main event. Rudy Maxa was an investigative reporter and columnist for the Washington Post for 13 years. Among other things, he uncovered more sex scandals than you can shake a stick at. But we won't talk about that right now. He was also a writer for Washingtonian magazine, and for a couple of glorious years in the early 90s, he was the Washington bureau chief for Spy magazine. But travel has always been Rudy's passion, that and writing or otherwise creating an amazingly prolific body of travel pieces. Currently, he is a contributing editor with National Geographic Traveler magazine. He's the host and executive producer of Rudy Maxa's World, which is now up to 91 half-hour episodes on the world's great destinations. These programs are aired on public television in the United States and the Travel Channel International around the world. And he is host and executive producer of the country's most widely syndicated weekend radio travel show. It's also called Rudy Maxa's World. It's broadcast on more than 165 news talk stations and live nationwide on XM radio every Saturday morning from 9:06 a.m. to 11 Central. It's channel 165 or live and streaming at rudymaxa.com. And speaking of internet addresses, if you wish to buy any of Rudy's DVDs or Blu-rays, we don't have them for sale here tonight, but you can get them online at www.maxa.tv. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, the travel writer extraordinaire, Rudy Maxa.
Wow, what a great crowd. I know, oops, are we turning off one mic and leaving? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. What an extraordinary crowd. Should we check that one mic there? Do I have two mics going on? Is that the problem?
Yeah, you're fine.
We'll start this over again. Okay. Thank you to the folks upstairs. I know I'm thinking of them, and it's great to see a full room here. Just out of curiosity, when I did come here 6 years ago and did 3 consecutive months in a row because one speech wasn't enough, how many of you might have been in this audience, how many might have heard any of those speeches? Geez, that's too, you really didn't have to come out today. I'm doing the same speech. It's just, we just changed the title, that's all. It's an old trick. I'm really sorry about that. Well, it's actually why we titled it Why Everything You Used to Know About Travel is Wrong, because we thought, we couldn't get you back a 4th time for yet another talk. The passage of time has allowed me to use this title, but I, of course, hope you realize it's a slight exaggeration in order to grab attention. I'm guessing most of you know that not everything you know about travel is wrong. I think we can all agree that travel has always been and will continue to be a wonderful experience. It can put life into perspective and lead to unexpected joys. In fact, lately I've been interested in reading some studies that found people who travel abroad, as well as people who are either speak a second language or are trying to speak a second language, are generally more creative in the workplace, are more flexible in solving problems, and can make more rapid decisions in workplaces. I don't know about at home, but certainly in workplaces. They also seem to deteriorate less mentally as they grow old. And on that point, those of you who heard me 6 years ago, you can decide in 45 minutes or so if that's necessarily true. But I do want to say it's such a delight to be back with you here at the St. Louis Public Library. Seriously, you never know what might result from travel. And one of my favorite stories I read about in the last year was of a woman named Ruth Handler, and she and her husband were visiting Switzerland in the 50s, and she came across a doll, not a baby doll or a little girl doll, but a doll of an adult woman. It was a German fashion doll that was manufactured between 1955 and 1964, and it was based on a curvy comic book character named Bild Lilly. It was a gag gift for men, but Ruth did not know that. When she returned to the States, she thought, well, it would be a great idea to have a grown-up woman doll that young girls could play with and pretend they're moms and play house with and all the things that went along with the 50s. And eventually she convinced her husband, who happened to be an executive with Mattel. You now know that doll as Barbie. Exactly, that's how Barbie came to be. Now, I think there are two lessons here. The first obvious one is that if Ruth hadn't traveled overseas, she never would have encountered Bill Lilly, and we'd have no Barbie. But the less obvious one is that she didn't know that what she saw in Switzerland was a gag gift. And one of the virtues of travel is that we are often temporary outsiders. And science writer Johann Lehrer, in a new book called Imagine How Creativity Works, said that we sometimes develop new ideas in foreign environments because we have fewer assumptions. We make certain assumptions. We live here in Kansas City. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. We make assumptions about things, and we sort of judge things without thinking too much about them because subconsciously we know. But I think Mr. Lehrer's book said if you're in a foreign place, you don't have that background. You don't have those assumptions, so you see things through new eyes, as Ruth did. It's like where I live in Minnesota, where everybody but me thinks winter is the absolute best season of the year because in the summer you can't ice fish. So, all right, the theme of this speech is what's changed in travel in the 3 years since I was last year in Cleveland with you. And because I've never given this talk before, I actually wrote this speech last weekend, so I have to refer to notes more than I usually do. And actually, when I reread it after I did a draft of it, I thought it sounded too much like homework. So I'm going to try to share some anecdotes while I talk and not just give travel advice. I'm going to weave in a few true stories that revolve around the fact that my job makes my friends very envious. And if I had a nickel for every person who I don't know who comes up to me in the public and says, "You need anybody to carry your bags?" I would have a bag of nickels. So the second sort of subtext, sub-theme to this talk tonight is why, even though I'm often shown on camera drinking a glass of Bordeaux in Bordeaux, or a glass of champagne in Champagne, or a glass of Malbec in Argentina, a glass of rice wine in Tokyo, the list, I can go on and on, a glass of Malbec in Mendoza, even though you see that, it's not really what I do. I really do work hard. And here's the rub. I do this while I have a producer who I think is trying to kill me. And I'm going to tell you about that the next 45 minutes as we talk. But first, let's do our lessons. Let's start with our first thing that speaks to the subject of this speech. By far, the biggest change in travel in the last 20 years, I talked about when I was here before, has been the rise of the internet. Never before, as travelers, did we have so much information at our fingertips, literally at our fingertips, because we could call them up on our computer. I mean, there are some in the room who are old enough to remember, if you wanted to fly to a city and you had never gone there before, you didn't know what airline flew there. And if you guessed the wrong airline, the reservationist on the phone would go, "We don't fly there, sorry, goodbye." If you got a kind reservationist, they'd say, "Oh, well, that's Eastern, they fly there," or TWA, or Pan Am. There's a whole list of them, actually, that... When I was last here, Twitter was just launching, but no one knew what it was or how to use it. LinkedIn and Facebook were just beginning to catch on, but I'd wager that none of us were using those sites quite yet. But I think the change in that time has been the rise of social media, but I still think a lot of us as travelers don't know what use social media is to us. Let me give you some examples. If you have ever written a letter of complaint to an airline, you may well have found that airline was unresponsive, or they may have taken weeks to get back to you, and you got a form letter saying something nice about something sort of relative to your problem. Well, today most airlines have teams of people who are monitoring major social media sites, particularly Twitter. That's because Twitter reflects the real-time frustrations of customers and passengers. All you have to do is tweet a gripe and include the name of the company you're irritated about, and then add a hashtag with the word failure. It's true. To catch the attention of a hotel or a cruise line, a rental car, or airline employee. Companies like JetBlue, Southwest, Hertz, Marriott all have a presence on Twitter, and their customer service and PR folks hang out on Twitter to head off any negative posting. Their goal is to solve a problem and soothe your ruffled feathers before the tweet goes viral and besmirches their corporate images, or before you have time to post it on YouTube. And millions of viewers are seeing it. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, a guy whose guitar was broken when it was being transported by United, and did a song called "United Broke My Guitar." And to this day, millions, literally millions of viewers on YouTube. And United was scrambling all over themselves to try to fix it, but it was too late. Here's an example of a different kind of use. I had on my radio show about 3 weeks ago a guy named Dave Kirpin. He's an expert on social media. He's written a best-selling book called Likeable Social Media. And he went to Vegas not long ago, and he got to his hotel, the Aria, in the city center. He found a huge line for the check-in. He was there for half an hour, and he really got irritated, so he was frustrated, and he tweeted a message about that long line at the Aria and then added #failure. He didn't hear from Aria. He didn't hear from the hotel he was standing in, but almost immediately he received a tweet from the Rio Hotel and Casino, a competitor. And the tweeter expressed regret for his long wait in line and wished him a nice stay in Vegas. Now, note that it wasn't a hard sell. And in fact, the Rio didn't suggest he come right out over. In fact, Kirpin told me that if they had, he might have wondered, oh, if the Rio's so great, why isn't there a long line of people waiting over there? Which might be a logical conclusion. But on every trip to Vegas since then, Kirpin has stayed at the Rio, and he's also booked large groups into there. The other use for social media is if you're going to a town you've never heard of. Let's say you're coming to Kansas City for the first time and you know it's got a great reputation for barbecue, but you go online and everybody's arguing about which barbecue is the best. And what's that beet meat place that closed down over by the, I mean, it's not there anymore, so you don't know where to go. Just tweet, say, I'm coming to Kansas City for the first time. Where's the best barbecue? And 9 times out of 10, you'll have somebody say, I'll meet you at the airport and I'm going to take you to my favorite place. I had a friend who dropped her new iPad about a month ago, and the screen cracked. So she called Apple. She tried to call Apple. That's hard. There are no phone numbers on the Apple website. She took her to an Apple store. Nobody would help her. They said, nothing we can do about it. So she tweeted her frustration out to the world, or at least to the Twitter world, and someone from Apple tweeted back and said, send me your iPad. And she did, and a couple of days later, she got a brand new one in the mail. Now, what really gets the attention of folks monitoring sites like Twitter is if you have a number of people following you. How do you get more followers? Well, by posting useful content. You don't have to create original content. You might just see an article that's of interest, and you tweet it out, and people go, that person has really good taste. They really know what I'm interested in. And that's how you get followers. You just become a trusted source for good information. And if you're clever, that doesn't hurt at all. Use hashtags to identify specific topics so that others on Twitter searching for a particular topic will find your post. Follow other tweeters who catch your interest, and they will often reciprocate by following you. It might take a year or so, but if you attract 1,000 followers, you're a force to be reckoned with when your cruise ship gets stuck in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico and those toilets start backing up. Yeah? Do a search for tweet chats in Google, and you'll be astounded at the variety of different subjects, some having to do with travel, by the way, that are scheduled around the clock every day. Join a couple of chat rooms, get to know and attract followers. Okay, I want to switch topics. Let me ask, and I can only see the hands, of course. I can't see those upstairs. I wish I could. How many of you actually care about frequent flyer miles? To some extent. Whoa, that's a lot of people. How many of you have actually altered your travel plans or taken an unnecessary trip or less convenient route in order to collect more miles? All right, if you move to the back of the room, the library has specialists there, therapists, who will deal with you on a... Listen, I understand. I've done mileage runs. To bastardize 2 of AA's 12 steps, I admit I am powerless over the lure of frequent flyer miles. And my life sometimes becomes unmanageable because of it. And yes, as a result, I'm afraid to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. There was a last week in December years ago when I did 2 round trips in 48 hours between DC and London just to become platinum on American Airlines. I mean, what is that about? What? I was an adult. I was 40. I was in my 40s. But in the last couple of years, there's grown a small and dedicated army of bloggers who post daily advice on how to garner more airline miles and hotel points. I'm going to mention 3 good sites. You won't believe it. You'll feel totally inadequate, as I do when I read these guys. The first is called milevalue.com. And I looked at this Monday morning's post as I was doing my notes. And this Monday morning's post dove into the arcane use of Starwood hotel points and its new feature that allows you to use points as well as cash to secure hotel rooms. But the site also has a mile value calculator. So if you've ever wondered if paying cash for an airline ticket, X number of dollars for an airline ticket, or using miles, what the smarter thing to do is, this mile calculator will tell you. The curator of milevalue.com is a smart young guy named Scott Grimmer. He's an American who lives in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He's only 25, but he's garnered enough miles to travel in first class to 30 different countries in his young life. And here's the big change in the frequent flyer program, probably in the last year and a half, 2 years. Today, the best and fastest way to garner miles is not to fly on the airline. It's through strategic applications for credit cards that give you big buckets of miles every time you sign up for one. The other day, one of these mileage bloggers, I'll give you two more names in a moment, I can't remember which one it was, applied for several credit cards and in one fell swoop put 350,000 miles in his frequent flyer accounts. Think about that. Value each mile at a penny, which is sort of how I figure it. Other people are a little more generous. But even at a penny, he picked up $3,500 worth of airline tickets by applying for 4 credit cards. And if you use those miles to their best advantage, not just for a ticket to St. Paul, why would you do that? But if you use those miles to upgrade on international flights, so you're in business or first class, the value of those 350,000 miles could go to $12,000. But no mile is too small for these guys to pursue. Also on Monday, on a second site I'd recommend called thepointsguy.com, a writer listed the top credit cards for earning miles or hotel points right now. Now, before you laugh at what he says, let me tell you, I earn literally 0.1% of interest on my cash in my local credit union. I mean, I'm paying them to store my money, near as I can tell. The Points Guy said on Monday that if I used a Premier Rewards Gold card from American Express, which I don't have, but if I used that to fill my car with gas, I'd earn 2 Amex points per dollar spent at the gas station, giving me more than a 3% return on my dollar when using those points for an airline ticket. I don't suggest you take your money out of the credit union and go buy a lot of gas you don't need just to get 3% on it, but then he listed 7 other credit cards that you can use to turn pumping gas into hotel rooms and airline tickets. Let me quote you the last graph in that post at thepointsguy.com. Don't try to remember. I mean, it was just, quote, based on the cards in my wallet, the most valuable points earning opportunity when it comes to gas is to max out the Chase Freedom Card's 5-time category spending bonus at $1,500 in spending for a total of 7,500 ultimate rewards points, which I can transfer to travel partners thanks to the fact I also have the Sapphire Preferred and Ink Bold. That means I'm essentially earning 5 United miles per dollar that I spend on gas for these 3 months. And since I value United miles at 2 cents a piece, that's like getting a 10% rebate on my spending, an even better deal considering the Freedom Card has no annual fee, unquote. Get a life. I mean, these guys are nuts. But they're smart nuts. For example, I did learn, I mean, I can't follow that. I was going to buy $1,500 worth of gas in 3 months anyway. I did learn on that same site that same day, though, that if you apply right now for Southwest Airlines personal and business credit cards simultaneously, because then they don't know the credit people haven't reported each other, you will instantly accrue 100,000 Southwest points. So you get your cards, you spend a few bucks, you take maybe a flight or two, you get 10,000 more Southwest points, you have 110 Southwestern points. What does that mean? It means that every time you buy a Southwest ticket for the rest of this year, you can take a companion for free with you. It'll cost you $10 for the 9/11 taxes, that's it. So you do this in January, so you get it in January, you get your card at the end of January, for 11 months, 2 of you fly for the price of 1. That's pretty incredible. That 100,000 miles for you, just you alone, equates to about $1,900 in Southwest's lowest tier called Want to Get Away fare. Add that free companion ticket and you've scored $3,800 worth of free airline tickets right there. The Points Guy even provides the Chase credit card's reconsideration phone number. I didn't know there were reconsideration phone numbers. I have an ex-girlfriend wish she had a reconsideration phone number. But you can call Chase's, he said, reconsideration phone number and explain you're willing to close any other Southwest cards you have and shift around your other Chase credit lines in order to get those 2 cards. Both the Points Guys as well as the Mile Value site let you sign up for free 5-day-a-week bulletins, which will make you crazy. They already have me. One more site. It's called Loyalty Lobby. It's run by a guy in Torrance, California named John Olila. And I only discovered this site this weekend while roaming around the web, but it looked quite helpful. I've signed up for his free bulletins too, so I too will have no life soon. He even invites you to ask him any questions you have about airline and hotel loyalty programs for free. Just write him and say, what do I do about this? He tells you. The point is, as nuts as these guys are, you never know what kind of information you're going to learn. Yesterday, for example, John at Loyalty Lobby, my new best friend, alerted me to a 48-hour sale by Hyatt that offers 30% off Hyatt's best rates for hotels in US, Canada, and the Caribbean through July 30th. Now, I don't think I'll be staying in any Hyatts, but it's good to know, and maybe I am going to stay in a Hyatt. I also learned this: if you're a doctor who's willing to be called upon during a Turkish airline flight during a medical emergency, so you got to be a doctor, you're on Turkish airline, and there's a medical emergency, and you register for what the airline calls its Smiling Doctor program, you'll pick up 5,000 bonus miles on your next Turkish Airlines flight. So take someone with you, they can feign a little heart attack, you give them a little CPR, boom. One more valuable thing, and this is serious. The mile value guy, who's good, I had him on my radio show, he's good. For a $99 fee, he will book your award tickets for you. This is no small perk, because all of us are booking them wrong. As you'll discover after about a week of getting these newsletters free dropping in your email box. For example, I want a United Airlines award ticket. I go to unitedairlines.com, and of course I find there are no award tickets, particularly at the lowest rate, for my flight, just like we all do. It's the wrong way to do it. Well, there's a better way to do it, let me put it that way. And I learned it from my mile value guy, or value mile guy. Remember, United is part of the Star Alliance, and it's got a dozen other airlines, including Air Canada, Lufthansa, ANA, and Singapore Airlines. It turns out some of those airlines will give you award seats on United for fewer miles than United will give them to you for. So it behooves you to shop a number of Star Alliance airline sites to see who offers the best deal on United. Or you can pay the mile value folks $99 to do it for you. And they're very creative at finding solutions. All right, you get the point, one more thing. The mile value guy offers free consultation on credit cards. You tell him where you want an award ticket to, he writes you back and tells you what credit cards to apply for that day, so you get those award miles immediately. How's that for specialization? All right, that's a lot of information. We'll catch our breaths here and digest all that information. Let me tell you about the producers trying to kill me. Let's get down to anecdotes here. So I've got these 91 shows on public television here and in 121 countries, in 22 different languages on Travel Channel International. It was not easy learning 22 languages, I can tell you. But, imagine how creative I am in the office with 22 languages. Well, first you should know this about my great job. My main job is to attract corporate underwriting to finance the shows. That's what I do. I dial for dollars, and people tell me no all day, all year. Beyond that, I am not my own boss. While on the road shooting, I sleep, I work, and I eat at the pleasure of my co-executive producer. She tells me and the crew to wake up at 5 in the morning. She tells me we don't have time to eat lunch today. She tells me what to wear. Her name is Sue, but she has warned me under threat of litigation not to use her last name this evening, which should tell you something about how she feels about the way she treats me. So I want Sue to retain her anonymity, so avert your eyes as the credits roll by on your next episode of Rudy Maxa's World. Now, make no mistake, I need Sue. We've made more than 40 shows together, and I've come to rely on her sort of the way a hostage comes to rely on their captor. Sort of a Stockholm syndrome on public television. Except someone else produced my Stockholm X episode, not Sue, but she was probably busy taking a postgraduate course in manhandling your host. It started with the sharks. Shark story number 1. Sue doesn't tell me everything we're going to do on a shoot because she doesn't want to give me the opportunity to complain. Like a raining morning, we were in Sydney, Australia. I woke up with a terrible head cold. She said, no worries, we're just going across the bay here. We're going to an aquarium. I thought, an aquarium, that's fine. That's inside, the head cold. That'll feel pretty good. Except it turns out when I get to the aquarium, there's a guy standing there with a wetsuit. Now, the last thing you want with a head cold is to have to breathe, Well, it turns out I was going to swim with the sharks. And they're nurse sharks, said Sue. They don't hurt people. Not the nurse sharks. I guess you wouldn't call them nurse sharks if they help. I thought that was a nice name, nurse sharks. So here I am in the wetsuit with a head cold, and one shark keeps rubbing by me every time she passes me. And when the ordeal is over, the marine biologist confessed, "I'm a little worried there with that shark rubbing against you." And I said, well, why is that? Well, it means it's not a happy shark. She's pregnant and cranky, and I thought he was referring to Sue, but he was actually talking about the shark. And a week later, when I returned to the States, in an American newspaper no less, I read that a nurse shark attacked somebody at Bondi Beach in Sydney and chewed off their leg. Apparently that shark had not been briefed by Sue that nurse sharks do not hurt people. Shark story number 2. She did it again in Bangkok. We were filming in a very upscale shopping center. I know a lot about Bangkok. But I didn't know that in this upscale shopping center there was an aquarium in the basement. Well, Sue did, and once again I was in with the sharks. I don't recall what kind of sharks they were, but apparently none of them were pregnant, so I was very happy. Shark story 3, the worst one. This took place in French Polynesia, where I really came to understand that Sue was enjoying this. I mean, this is no coincidence, 3 shark scenes. So at one point in Bora Bora, the crew and I found ourselves bucking waves in a dive boat, and we were heading out to the open water where we were sure there were a lot of sharks frolicking. Or sharks, I don't know if sharks frolic, but once again, it was wetsuit time, but at least this time I wasn't going in alone. We had hired a local underwater photographer who had a great big heavy camera. So rather than shooting me from the other side of thick glass in an aquarium, as had happened previously, my photographer would be underwater with me, and he was a local guy, so I felt pretty good. But of course, there was a surprise. As we jumped in the water, I'm sort of treading water a little and going down, and I noticed things were beginning to drift downward all around me. It appeared like big sort of snowflakes, giant snowflakes coming down. And as the flakes floated closer, I realized those flakes were really chum. And I suddenly imagined Sue up there on top, happily shoveling the chum into the water. And I turned around, and there were about 25 sharks coming at about 125 miles an hour at me. And in a panic, I looked at my photographer, and he's going, "Yeah, looks good." Now, he had this great big camera, this big, between him and the sharks. And you're looking at, this is all I had, right here. I survived. I pretended I was inside a pretty snow cone with graceful fish drawn by Pixar artists circulating all around me, snapping up little snowflakes. And much to my relief, Sue summoned us very quickly out of the water. I thought, well, she's really concerned about my terror. I mean, at least she got me out of there. No, she said, we need to return to shore because our on-the-boat photographer was getting seasick. Well, excuse me. Now, you think I'm too harsh? Let me tell you, this is true. And I hope this is live and streaming on YouTube, but I should have told her to watch tonight. This is a woman whose mother is afraid of elevators. And by her own admission, Sue enjoys riding on them with her kind elderly mother, hitting the emergency stop and then the passenger alarm, and convincing her mother they're going to plummet 53 stories at any moment. Now, you see, of course, none of this reflected in any of the shows. I'll look graceful in the water, the sharks will look beautiful. All those glasses of wine I described that I sip in cafes, well, we pull up at a cafe in a restaurant in a van. Sue jumps out, asks the bar for half a glass of wine, throws me in a chair, maybe with a newspaper, and I try to look as if I've been sitting there reading all afternoon and probably on my 4th glass of wine. Within minutes, we are back in the van. All right, and I'll get back to Sue in a moment. Let's get back to class. Let me talk about a few things that might make your life a little better. I'm not watching the time at all. I left my watch in the other room. So does anybody have the time? 5 after. Oh, we're okay. Oh, good. Okay. Accumulate enough miles on a particular airline, and you may qualify for elite status, or the airline's frequent in the airline's frequent flyer. That allows you to check bags for free, to board first, to have some fees waived, maybe even to be upgraded on a space available basis to the front of the plane. But that formula is about to change. About 6 weeks ago, Delta announced that beginning next year, you'll not only have to accumulate a certain amount of miles or segments, you'll have to spend a minimum amount of money on Delta tickets. This is meant to reward high-paying business passengers. In short, men and women who aren't paying a cent to fly. And to thwart guys like those frequent flyer people I mentioned to you who write those blogs, who figure out complicated mileage runs and accumulate 15,000 miles on a $310 ticket. Well, let's examine this very quickly. It takes 25,000 miles to achieve silver status on Delta. Beginning next year, we'll have to spend $2,500 in cash on Delta as well. And that doesn't sound too tough, does it? $2,500 for 25,000 miles? Well, it depends. Last month, you could buy a New York, in January and February, in fact, you could buy a New York-London round-trip ticket on Delta for $826. So you might logically think, 3 round trips like that, you'd meet your $2,500 threshold for the year, right? Actually, $642 of that ticket goes to fees and taxes. which means Delta only collects $184, which means they are flying you across the Atlantic each way for $92. And you're only going to get credited for $92 each way toward that $2,500. Now, that's an extreme example. The fees in the UK and the taxes are ridiculous. But that $92 fare explains why, on average, the major American airlines last year made on each passenger's trip an average of 21 cents. And I mean, I'll give them 35 cents. I mean, if I don't have to fly, you know. I expect that other competitors are going to follow Delta's revenue-based model. And if you add to that the difficulty of scoring award seats in summer, I can tell you frequent flyer programs are starting to bug me. The conventional wisdom among travel writers is now burn your miles because they're going to constantly get devalued. And I think that's true. I remember what Winston Churchill once said about someone he didn't particularly care about. He said, he has all the virtues I dislike and none of the vices I admire. And that's sort of how I'm beginning to feel about frequent flyer programs. I think the points guys are going to have to work doubly hard once this comes into being. You know, this weekend I spent quite a bit of time advising two friends on upcoming trips. One was going to London. He hadn't been there in years. So I wrote him my restaurant suggestions, and I suggested some offbeat sites he might not, think to see. Another was a friend who was taking two of his teenagers, or his two teenagers, to southern France and the Italian Riviera, and he wanted to know if he should rent a home in Aix-en-Provence or further south down the French Riviera. The crucial thing, he said, was to find a place that wouldn't bore the two teenagers. In case you're interested, I said to my friend Nick, I said, Aix is a very lovely town, but for two teenagers, I suggested a rental in the small French Riviera town called Juan-les-Pins, between Cannes and Nice. It's good beach, got a lot of good little shops in one little neighborhood and cheap restaurants and a lot of youth action. Kids would be fine. Anyway, while I was working on those emails, I realized another thing that's changed over the years. We were thrilled with the internet and all the information it gave us, but now there's so much information that we're looking for someone or something trustworthy to tell us what to do, because there's just so much information on just about every destination in the world. How do we separate the wheat from the chaff? Well, if I hadn't known what to suggest to my friends in these two cases, my granddaughters live in London, I spent a lot of time there, I spent a lot of time in South France, I would have sent them to a new site called Fortnighter. It's a site that provides customized itineraries. You tell them where you want to go and give them a profile of your fellow travelers. Are they teenagers? Are they girls? Are they boys? Are they fellow couples? And a local travel writer in that place offers you specific recommendations, sort of a very personalized triptych, if you remember those things that AAA gives out. You get recommendations on restaurants, on sites to see, hotels, and then 10 things you don't know about the destination, you might not know about the destination. A 1 to 3 day itinerary costs $135. A 4 to 5 day stay is $200, and a 7 day or longer trip plan costs $320. I wondered if I was moving there for a year, if I could get a year's worth of things to do for $320. But now, I have not tried this service. I just discovered it recently. I can't vouch for it, but I can tell you it'll probably beat the average travel agent. So keep that in mind. I've already forgotten the name. I want to tell you again. It's called Fortnighter. Check it out. And I have a hunch that more sites like that actually conglomerate information. There are tons of them. Lonely Planet has them. Everybody's got them. But I think more and more sites that really do say this person knows this town, this country, this city, are going to be the answer to this massive amount of information that we're presented with. I mean, you look at TripAdvisor for a particular hotel and you don't know what to do. A third of the people had the most wretched experience staying there. The other third thought they had gone to heaven. And the other third, apparently weren't quite clear where they were. Now let's talk about airfares briefly. The question I get asked most often is, should I change my money here or there? I don't know what's with that question. It seems to paralyze people. And I tell them, look, yurts in Mongolia have automatic teller machines. Relax. That's where you should get your local currency. But the second most frequently asked question is, how do I get the cheapest airfare? 6 years ago, I would have told you to go to Orbitz or Expedia or Travelocity or Priceline and compare fares. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about those sites. You can see various airlines and you see what the fares are and you see what the flight times are. But the very first site I would tell you to go to today is called itasoftware.com. itasoftware.com. It's commonly known as Google's ITA matrix because Google bought it from a bunch of very bright MIT types. It's a very powerful tool that you can use to find prices that many of the regular booking engines don't have. You can then take that information, because you cannot book a ticket on that site. You can then use that information, take it to a travel agent or a third-party site like Expedia or the ones I mentioned to make a booking. For example, yesterday, since I knew I was going to be here today, I went to Expedia. I priced a round-trip ticket between LA and London on Expedia for travel April 12th through the 19th, 1 week. Cheapest fare on Expedia was $1,220 on United Airlines. On ITA software, I found the exact same flights, exact same day, for $956. That's a $264 difference, double that if two of you are traveling, of course. Now, I did check out fares between Kansas City and Paris and found both the third-party site like Expedia as well as ITA software gave me the same least expensive fare on US Airways for mid-April. So you're not always going to find the cheapest fare. But the ITA software, while I was looking for a flight from here to Paris, anything to avoid going back to St. Paul in the winter, and it's still winter there, believe me. The ITA software showed me if I was willing to fly Monday to Monday instead of Friday to Friday, I'd save money. And it gave me 8 options for flight combinations on US Airways, while Expedia only showed me 2. How does the ITA software do it? Well, it goes much deeper into airline systems and compares more sites. Third-party sites do not search an airline's inventory until you choose a routing. Now, as I said, the catch is you can't book a ticket directly on ITA software, but you can use the information you find to coax that information out of an Expedia. In fact, once you've chosen your routing, ITA breaks down the fare, a complicated line of codes that travel agents work. You can call it a fare construction, which you can print out and take to a travel agent and say, this is what I want. And they can replicate that fare category exactly. Or you can buy it on Expedia, though you may have to, again, coax Expedia into finding that exact routing. And you may at first find a higher fare displayed, but when you choose it, you don't have to pay for it yet, but when you say that's the flight I want, Expedia then actually goes into the airline system and often comes back with that cheaper fare. But you've got to make an exact note of the exact routing and fare code. A simplified sort of secondary resource is a sister to that site. It's google.com google.com/flights. There you can ask where, it's great. You can, you find some money on the street, you can go to google.com/flights and say, got $300, where can I go from Kansas City? And it'll tell you everywhere you can go for $300. You can easily check alternative dates. The interface is a little less complicated, but it still uses that very powerful ITA engine. When it comes to rental car rates, it's the same advice I gave 6 years ago. It hasn't changed. I still find that bidding on Priceline saves me a lot of money. The only drawback is that if you are a member of, say, Hertz's Gold Club and it gives you a Hertz car, you still have to go to the Hertz desk when you arrive. You can't get it. You can't just walk to your car, and you don't accrue any points with Hertz's loyalty program. But who cares if you save $100 on a 3-day car rental or $200 on a week's rental? Just go to a major car rental site, plug in your rental dates and size of car, get the retail price, go to Priceline, choose the bid option, because Priceline will give you a set price or bid. Choose the bid option. Now keep in mind the price you're going to put on your bidding on Priceline will not include taxes, and Priceline's going to add those on there. So bid low, bid about 1/3 off the retail price, not including taxes and fees, and I can almost guarantee your bid will be accepted by a major rental car company unless you're trying to rent in Vegas during the Consumer Electronic Convention or somewhere where there aren't many cars available. I still bid for hotels on Priceline. Again, you don't know the hotel you're going to stay in until you give them your credit card. But you choose the neighborhood, you choose a category of hotel, and I've never been disappointed. But that field of hotel rentals has been sliced and diced up a lot since I was last year in Kansas City. For example, if you have a smartphone, check out the app called Hotel Tonight. This is not a website, it's an app for phones. It's a useful last-minute discounted site for hotels in major US cities, and they've now expanded to Europe. Every morning, the Hotel Tonight folks learn from their participating hotels in these major cities how many rooms they have that haven't been sold. So it's really a distress sale. The hotels make a certain number of unsold rooms available to Hotel Tonight, and at noon, local time of the city the hotels are in, the hotels go up on your smartphone at Hotel Tonight. They're generally 3 or 4 hotels, and they range from basic, simple, not too fancy hotels, but not shabby ones either, big major chains, to 4- and 5-star luxury hotels. I've used it to save money several times. Want to save money on a vacation rental? You probably know about Airbnb. that offers individual homes and apartments for rent. It's a very good site. You probably know VRBO, it stands for Vacation Rental by Owner. It as well is a very good site. Look, the internet has let anyone with a spare room anywhere in the world put it up for sale. So you do have to be careful. There are people who put up rooms that they don't own. And then you send in your money and you knock on the door and they look at you like you're falling out of from the moon. The nice thing about an established company like Airbnb and VRBO is your rent isn't paid to your host until 24 hours after you get there. So if it's not much consolation if you're looking for a place to stay, but if you hate the place when you arrive, you don't have to check in. About 40% of the rentals on Airbnb, though, involve a roommate, so it's great for budget travels. HomeAway.com is a more traditional site offering private homes for rent. Register online, find a property you like in the US or Europe, and then ask the site to show you comparable properties so you can compare. Guests also post reviews of the homes or apartments. It's a very good site. And there's a new one called Roomarama. Great name, Roomarama.com. It's especially good for places in Europe and Asia. Most of the properties listed are second homes handled by a management company, which gives you another sort of level of comfort, I would think. There's not many listings in the US, but Roomarama exercises very tight control on its owners and renters, and you can post what you're looking for, and people will contact you saying, hey, we got this for you, here's some pictures. It's a reliable and trustworthy site. VRBO and its sister site, HomeAway.com, also offer overseas rentals, but the problem is you can't look by price. So for example, you want to rent a home in Orlando to do your Disney thing. You coming to take me? Oh, okay. Oh, my time was up. This looks scary. So on VRBO, you're going to see all these homes in Orlando. It's going to take you out pages. There'll be 40 pages, literally of them. TripAdvisor has purchased a site called FlipKey.com. A unique advantage of this site is you can compare the cost of renting a home to local hotels. It also has a UK partner called Holiday Lettings, lettings.co.uk, with more listings in Europe and particularly Britain. All right, so far this evening, we're almost done with the seminar. We've covered airlines, hotels, rental cars, some extent vacation homes just now. A word about cruise ships. Were you all on that? You've all been sailing Carnival lately? Is it? No. Yeah, I know. Boy, that's been a bad year for cruise ships, starting with the Costa Concordia. If you've never booked a cruise, you need a trusted advisor and a good engine on that cruise ship and good plumbing too. So. There are several websites that review ships, and the most important thing is finding one that fits your personality. And if you've cruised before, you know that. It's a very important first step. Then you want to use a travel agent who sells a lot of cruises. The advantage to that is they have deals with the cruise lines because of the volume of business they do. They might just get a bottle of champagne for you or have a bottle of champagne waiting for you in your stateroom, but they might also upgrade you to a balcony if you've bought an interior stateroom, etc. They have perks that they can negotiate. If you're an experienced cruiser and know what you want, why not have them bid for your business? There's a website called cruisecompete.com. You just go to it, put in your desired destination, the dates you want to sail, and if you have a preferred cruise line, put that in. Then you just sit back and let travel agents all around the world bid for your business and offer you prices. I got to say, the very hottest sector of the cruising industry is one I like, which is river cruising. That has become very popular in the last 2 years, and companies like AMA Waterways and Viking River Cruises cannot build vessels. They call them vessels. How often do you hear that word, vessels? They don't call them ships or boats, they're always vessels. They're building vessels as fast as they can. It's a great way to see Europe. They're even sailing down the Mekong River in Southeast Asia now. You're traveling on a small, very well-appointed vessel that leisurely cruises down the Rhine or the Danube or the Mekong. The food is usually very good because the kitchen can access local produce and fruits and meats and vegetables, because every day you stop in one or two small towns, maybe one small town, you might be there for hours. The river cruise, they have bicycles, you can ride bikes around, you can sit in a cafe, and unlike me, actually finish a glass of wine. I think this is going to be increasingly popular with baby boomers who don't necessarily need a nightclub or a casino while they're on the water. It's also a very congenial way to make friends because it's a very low-key environment. It's very pleasant. I wish I had tips on how to tell you to save money on river cruises. Just go to AMA Waterways or Viking or one of the other ones, not Viking Cruises, but Viking River Cruises, and get yourself on the email list, and you'll be notified about sales occasionally. But the demand is so heavy, they're almost booked up for this year already. And you might not find the sales as radical as you will find on Holland America or, of course, Carnival. How are we doing on time? I'm sorry, I usually wear a watch, but my shirt was so tight I didn't wear it. How's my time? What time? How much after?
7:20.
7:20. What time? I started, okay, because we want to do some Q&As. All right, my last piece of advice has to do with camels, and I know that was promised you. It was sort of a weird tweet they put out there. Well, I got to deal with camels here. Avoid them at all costs, is my advice. I have successfully ridden camels in Egypt and Jordan, but I've never really enjoyed that ride. They spit, they smell, they're not a very comfortable ride. But after an incident that happened to me while we were shooting a show in Uzbekistan, I will never ride a camel again, and I'd advise you to give them wide berth as well. In the middle of the Silk Road town of Khiva, it's spelled Khiva, but it's pronounced Khiva, there's one camel. Her name is Katherine. As far as I know, she's the only camel in town. I saw no other camels. And her owner stands next to her under a shaded tree, and every once in a while, somebody comes and puts their child on top of Katherine, they snap a picture, give the guy $1, and everybody's happy. You remember Sue, my producer? Sue thought it would be a swell idea if we did the show close with me on top of the camel in a very heavy velvet Uzbek robe. It's 110 degrees in the summer there, and a bearskin cap. And I would sort of be sitting on the camel as it walked down the street, and I would deliver my closing line to the camera. I was going to be carrying a silk carpet, and I was going to say something like, well, I'm leaving Uzbekistan laden with silk and spices, I don't know, and then I say goodbye in the local dialect or the local language, which I don't remember. 22 languages, a lot to remember. So we asked through the interpreter, Sue asked through the interpreter, maybe Mr. Maxa tonight, it was in the morning, we'll come back at 7:30 when the light's nice, Rudy can ride Katherine, we'll do this thing. And he went, no, not good idea, not good idea. Sue said, well, how about for $50? Well, he thought that was a better idea. So sure enough, we come back about 7:30 when the light is just perfect, and we proffer $50, and we get down on the cobblestone street, and I climb on the camel. Now this camel, this is the stripped down model. There were no accessories on this one, no saddle, no rope, just bare ass camel. So I climb up this ladder and I get this camel. I'm holding a silk carpet, and I don't know if I had spices on the other hand, who can remember. And the owner is feeding Katherine bread as he walks down the cobblestone street, and the camera doesn't see him. He just sees me proudly on the camel. And I deliver my line to the camel, and everything's just fine. And we get off. But, you know, Sue never just wants one take when you can have 15. So, well, let's do that again. I said, well, that was a perfect take. I mean, I delivered the line. I said that everything's right. You know, Katherine's cooperating. No, one more time. So I dismount from the ladder. Katherine and I walk back together to the starting point. I climb back up the ladder, and in about 10 seconds, I feel, I don't know how to describe what I felt. I felt undulating between my legs. I felt powerful muscles. And I felt myself going up into the air. And I was up long enough to look down at the cobblestone street and actually think about it. I think this is going to have a very unhappy ending, and it did. I landed on my right shoulder, and I was knocked out. I was out cold. My crew, actually, even Sue, thought I was dead. And I know, because the camera was running, so I saw it. It's a very brief thing. And I thought later, well, this is great. We can put this on YouTube, because people love stupid people doing stupid things on YouTube. We'll get 1 million hits, and then they'll go buy DVDs at Maxa.tv. See who this idiot is. Well, I got up, and there was blood sort of all over the place, but I was in shock. I didn't know at the time, I was in shock. So I'm going, oh, no, shoulder, I'll work that out, you know. And come on, we got to go to dinner. Let's go on to dinner. It's fine. We got one good take. And somebody's holding me back, and an ambulance came, and they gave me a shot for my shock. And we went to the hospital, and it turns out I had a broken right shoulder, and I got stitches in my head. And even a friend of mine, a very sarcastic friend of mine who's an actor in LA, said, well, I'd like to see that clip, that film clip you have that you didn't post on YouTube. So I sent it to him, and he called me up. He said, you know, I didn't enjoy that as much as I thought I would. Now, Sue vowed never to put me at such risk, but she apparently had her fingers crossed when she said it, because a few months later, she was throwing chum in the Pacific Ocean while I was... Now, if you catch the Uzbekistan show, You will see that one first take. It's the close of the show. I'm looking healthy. My right shoulder seems to be working. There's no blood dripping down my forehead. And as Paul Harvey used to say, now you know the rest of the story. Robert Heinlein wrote in his book, Stranger in a Strange Land, I want to spit back at a camel and ask him what he's so sour about. And I know what he means. Now, before I open the floor to questions, I want to end my talk with a different quote, but those of you who were here last time around might remember it. It's my mantra. I can't help but end it with this. And those of you who are here for the first time, this is not original with me. You are welcome to use this mantra and hold it close as you travel. Make it your own. It's a quote from one of my favorite people, Britney Spears. She was once asked what she likes about being famous, and I'm going to quote it directly. The cool thing about being famous is traveling, the little darling once said. I've always wanted to travel across seas, like to Canada and stuff. Thank you. You're a great audience. Thank you upstairs, people, too. We'll be up there soon. All right.